Welcome to this explainer. Okay, today we are peeling back the curtain on something wild. It's one of the most secretive, extreme, and honestly dangerous practices in all of sports. Think about it. We see the final product under the bright lights, right? Two athletes supposedly the exact same size going toe-to-toe. But what if I told you that perfectly matched fight is often an absolute illusion? Today, we are decoding the extreme world of making weight, and more importantly, the extreme weight rebound. 12.7 kilograms. That is exactly how much weight one single mixed martial arts fighter gained in just 32 hours before a bout, according to a documented study out of the UK. For context, that is 28 pounds of mass packed onto a human frame in a day and a half. Just let that sink in for a second. We aren't talking about bulking up in the gym over a year. We're talking about overnight. How is this even humanly possible? And why on earth would someone put their body through it? Let's start making sense of this with Section 1, the weight cutting culture. So how do they do it? Well, this isn't some simple diet. It's a meticulously calculated system of total bodily depletion. 7 days out from the official weigh-in, athletes start heavily restricting their food and, crucially, their fluids. By 3 days out, they enter this brutal phase of severe voluntary dehydration. 1 day out, it's literally about forcing out whatever moisture is left in their system. They're sitting in boiling saunas, training in these non-breathable rubber sweatsuits, even spitting into cups just to lose a few final ounces of saliva. Then, at 0 days out, they finally step on the official scale, often looking completely exhausted and severely drawn. Now, you might be thinking this extreme rapid weight loss, or RWL as it's known, is just some fringe practice, reserved for a few desperate fighters. But the data shows it's a rampant culture affecting anywhere from 70 to 90% of combat athletes. This is the norm. It's a deeply ingrained part of the sport's DNA, and it's totally driven by the belief that stepping into the ring against a naturally smaller opponent absolutely guarantees success. Which brings us to Section 2, the rapid weight gain rebound. The entire sport focuses so heavily on the weigh-in, but survival on the scale is really just the prologue. The core truth we're uncovering today is this. It's actually not about the weight you cut. It is all about the weight you regain. The exact second that official steps off the scale, a frenzied, desperate race against the clock begins. The goal? To shove as much fluid and carbohydrate back into the body as physiologically possible before the referee rings that bell. When we look at the data for rapid weight gain, or RWG, across different sports, we see a massive disparity. In judo, athletes average a 2.6% body mass regain. In wrestling, it jumps up to 5.3%. But look at MMA. Fighters there are packing on an average of nearly 12% of their body mass in that short recovery window. So why the huge difference? It really just comes down to the rules. Judo often requires weigh-ins very close to the actual competition, leaving almost no time to recover. MMA, on the other hand, typically features a weigh-in a full 24 to 32 hours before the fight. That massive window is the golden ticket. It's what allows a fighter to balloon back up, carrying raw, heavy mass right into the cage to dominate physical interactions. So let's get into the core of this whole strategy. Section 3, does weight gain drive results? First off, we have to ask whether cutting all this weight completely ruins a fighter's body before the bell even rings. A massive meta-analysis on combat athletes reveals a pretty surprising truth. If athletes drop up to 5% of their body weight, but they're given a few hours to recover, rehydrate, and eat, their explosive power and maximal strength miraculously do not drop. They just bounce right back. The human body is incredibly resilient. If they have the time, the negative effects of the cut are essentially wiped out. But here is the real focus. Does actually being heavier win you the fight? Well, the data tells a fascinating story of two very different combat styles. In grappling sports, the research shows a very significant competitive advantage from rapid weight gain. Think about it. When you have to physically lift, pin, and control another human being on a mat, having an extra 10 pounds of mass provides incredible leverage, force, and heavy top pressure. It's a huge edge. However, in striking sports, the advantage is equivocal, meaning it's highly debated. Being heavier doesn't necessarily make your punches faster or your footwork more agile. In fact, the lingering fatigue from that brutal weight cut might actually slow a striker down. So in those sports where size absolutely dictates the outcome, athletes are basically breaking the system. Going back to our 12.7 kilogram regain statistic from earlier, that amount of weight allows an athlete to effectively compete up to 3 full weight classes higher than their official weigh-in. Seriously, you could have two athletes weigh in at 155 pounds on Friday, but by Saturday night, one athlete might step into the cage at 160 pounds, while the other steps in at 183 pounds. It's a completely unfair fight hiding right in plain sight. This brings us to a really serious topic. Section 4, the hidden health costs. The medical literature on this is genuinely alarming. By doing this, athletes are inducing acute kidney damage from the sheer lack of water. Some even develop something called lanugo, which is this fine, soft hair that grows all over their bodies because they lack the basic body fat to keep themselves warm. They're suffering from bone density loss, essentially giving elite young athletes the fragile skeletons of the elderly. They experience cardiovascular dysrhythmias, meaning their hearts beat irregularly due to extreme electrolyte imbalances. And ironically, muscle protein degradation happens too, meaning their bodies literally start eating their own muscles just to survive the weight cut. Doctors actually have a formal name for this kind of internal damage. It's a terrifying syndrome known as the athlete triad, and it affects both females and males. This is the dangerous interrelationship among chronic energy deficiency, severe reproductive or menstrual dysfunction, and osteoporosis. Because these athletes live in a constant state of low energy availability, basically starving themselves to stay close to a target weight, their endocrine systems just shut down non-essential functions, like reproduction, and their bones stop remodeling properly. And the scars aren't just physical. A consensus statement from the International Olympic Committee Medical Commission noted this, quote, "The most frequent eating disorder diagnosis among elite athletes is that of an ED not otherwise specified," end quote. The extreme binge and purge cycle of weight cutting and regaining creates this deep psychological trauma around food. Athletes develop clinical eating disorders that can haunt them for the rest of their lives, long after they retire from the sport. So, what do we do about this? Let's look at Section 5, fixing a dangerous system. The IOC Medical Commission and top sports scientists have actually laid out some pretty clear, actionable rule modifications. First up, standardize sufficient weight categories, so athletes simply don't feel forced to make massive drops just to find a class where they can compete. Second, ban mid-season weight class drops. The idea is if you start a season at one weight, you stay there. No extreme mid-season starvation allowed. And third, require competition certificates. Athletes should be randomly tested for hydration and minimum body mass. If your tests show you're severely dehydrated or your body fat is dangerously low, you simply do not get to compete, period. Which leaves us with this final massive question to think about. Weight classes were originally invented in combat sports to protect smaller fighters from getting hurt by larger ones, right? That was the whole point. But today, if athletes are routinely stepping into the ring 3 weight classes heavier than they weighed in just yesterday, are weight classes actually protecting athletes anymore? Or is the culture of the weigh-in putting them in far more extreme danger than the fight itself? Thanks for joining me on this explainer. I really hope this changes how you watch the sport forever. See you next time.